Hello everyone, it's Linda Ockwell-Jenner here, co-founder of the Small Business Community Network with another SBCN Small Biz Perspectives. And I'd like to say I haven't got my friend Steve Bentley here tonight, but sadly I do. Hi
Oh,
Steve.
what an intro.
I know, because just before we came on air, you messaged me and said, can I talk about Trump? So I thought I would punish you.
I talk about Trump on TV too, and I get punished there, so no difference.
So, Mr. Bentley from Northern River Financial, I believe you have a very interesting topic for us this evening.
Yeah, you know what? I had a discussion with a client about a week ago talking about a very difficult situation that they had with a really large client of theirs. And the work they were doing was great, and they were getting good rapport, but the relationship with the decision makers and the owners of the company was poor, very poor. Matter of fact, it was so frustrating and so stressful. We eventually talked to the point where the client decided, I can't do this anymore. I can't work with this person. I can't work with this company. Yeah. So I said, you know what? It is okay for us to always look at the clients we're working with and sometimes decide that maybe it's not worth going forward. Yeah. And so the concept of firing a client, people have to engage that. You think, well, why would I ever want to fire a client? I want all the clients I can get. But you know what? You got to make sure they work for you, yeah, and you work for them, and they're not using up too many of your time and resources and money for something that may not be productive for you. So I think that's the concept I want to drill down to.
That's a very good topic. I've worked with some difficult clients, and I guess I've been blamed for stuff I didn't do or not giving them enough time. So in my case, I just haven't renewed the contract even if they wanted to. I always feel a bit guilty. I do have a guilt thingy, but it's business, isn't it?
And I think we got to cut through that. And I think that guilt is very relevant and is very prevalent with a lot of people because they feel it's always something that they've done. Well, you know what? Not necessarily, right? As long as you know you've given it your best effort. But there's other things that get impacted by working with people that you can't necessarily have a productive business with. And I think the concept of, is the customer always right? I mean, you hear that around a lot, but you know what? No. And so there's some things organizationally that I want to touch on that sort of people don't think about when it comes to the impact of working with a client that is very demanding, taking up a lot of time, and you don't have a strong working relationship with.
So the bit that interests me is the customer always right? So can you give us some ideas where, as you say, there may not be and you have to,
Exactly. Richard Branson, Richard Branson,
I love
right?
Richard.
And he basically said, client isn't always right. The employees are always right. And I think a lot of business people, where they do have employees, they have to respect and stand up for their employees. So, if something happens and your clients are going in a different direction and you're having a challenge with them, make sure you're standing behind your employees first and supporting them with respect to what that engagement may be with that customer, right? Doesn't mean you don't listen to what their point is. It doesn't mean you don't try and find ways of righting it. But at some point, if things aren't going in a good direction and you've tried, at some point you need to cut your losses. So I think that's a very strong point, is making sure that you stand behind.
Yeah, but so are we talking about issues that the client's having with the employees or issues where the client's too needy? What kind of examples?
Yeah, that's another point too, is where clients are too needy. And you got to look at your time too. How much time are you spending on a client where maybe they're not contributing a lot to your revenue, right? And they're asking all these little nitpicky things and all these little things of you that really are not something you need to provide, or things that are really not important, right? So how much are you deriving time away from other clients, yeah, and other successful revenue streams to try and cater to the little demands that some of these frustrating clients can make? So that's another point, is making sure that you're not wasting time on people that aren't really contributing to your business and contributing to your revenue.
What about the relationship though between the employee and the customer, where you said that you back the employee? I mean, what kind of situation would that be?
I'll give you a perfect example. I was in electronics store about a year ago, and I walked up to return something at the counter, and all of a sudden this client was yelling at the salesperson behind the counter. And just going on and on. And the guy's wife was beside it, and she was just sort of, please don't do this. But her husband is going ahead and swearing. And the manager comes up and he says, look, I understand you have an issue, but until you stop mistreating my employee and swearing and calm down, we're not going to do anything about this. And if this continues, you can walk out the store. So you got to be very strong in terms of, a lot of the times you don't take that direct impact from, disgruntled clients, disgruntled customers, and your employees are taking that. So you got to make sure you backstop them and stand up for them in the situation where you are seeing that they're facing that kind of challenge. Because I think the happier the employee too, because if they're doing that day on, day out, and working with difficult clients, their work attitude, their production, all those things are going to be impacted by it.
Could you ever come across a situation where instead of firing the client, maybe getting them to work with a different person within the organisation? Maybe there's a clash of personalities, maybe, do you think? Is that possible?
Well, sure. And I think before you even go to the point of firing a customer or ending a relationship, you got to look at all those things, right? And I think sometimes maybe it is a personality thing. Maybe somebody has a better rapport with them. And if there's somebody in your organization that can be in that position and have that relationship and work productively with that person, well, then sure, that's another option, right? And I think the firing is sort of the last resort. It's not something you want to do until you've tried all those different ways to try and placate the relationship.
But you couldn't fire a client within a certain period of the contract. I mean, surely you have to come to the end of the contract if they have a contract. You couldn't fire them and not finish the work.
I think it depends on the contract.
I guess
but
so,
yes,
yeah.
I would agree with you on that. But if there's a provision in your contract where, if things aren't working out, or you've got a strategy by a clause in the contract that gives you that option, well, then maybe earlier. But I always say, if you signed a contract, you're committed to it, and you got to work through it until you're done it. And then when it comes up again, as you mentioned earlier, well, then you can reflect on whether you want to continue with that relationship.
And I think we all get into business saying we can choose how many hours we work and who we work with. And I got to tell you the truth, I've got some difficult clients at the moment. We have a personality clash. We have a lack of trust. We have issues where I send emails and they don't get it answered. They're not really that important, so that I'm not going to fire anybody. Whether the contract will be renewed, I don't know. But I get on with everybody because I'm the social sweetheart.
Well, is that a good thing? Yeah,
I don't actually.
I think it depends on how much work you're doing for any particular client, right?
Nobody's going to want to work with us now because I think we're going to fire them if they're our bad clients.
But the reason I think it's an important topic is because people have to realize that you got to be very careful how you allocate your resources within your business. And if you find that a difficult relationship or a difficult client is drawing away from more productive work and successful work with other people, well, then you got to look at that. You got to make sure that you're not impacting your organization by continuing to try and do everything for everybody, because you can't. And I think that extends into knowing the type of clients you want and engaging with those types of clients and not trying to do everything for everybody, because that's where that kind of issue comes up.
I fired somebody once, but I was the client. When many years ago when I wrote my first book, I was very innocent and naive and very trusting. I soon changed. I don't trust anybody anymore. And I guess it was a trusted organisation. Okay, let me say this again. I met the people, the partnership who I fired, through a trusted organisation via a networking event, but it was all the same organisation. And I'm thinking to myself like an idiot, well, I can trust this business because of the organisation. And basically, I handed over half of my, very tight budget for this first book. And basically, they were not getting anything done. They weren't on schedule. So my business partner, husband Dave, said, we're going to fire you. And they goes, whoa, we're going to go and see a lawyer because we need the rest of our money. And Dave says, well, go and get your lawyer. So obviously they didn't. And then luckily we found somebody who could finish the project for us. But from a client's perspective, having to fire somebody and they take half my budget away, half my money, that was absolutely horrible. So whether you're the client, or what, you gotta be trusting people. Obviously, I understand that, and do your research. And this is why I say to people, I will never just refer one business to anybody. I refer 2 or 3, all different personalities, all different price points. Because if you are stuck working with a client and you don't gel personality or price point or something, and you have to, part the ways. It can be upsetting, can't it?
Well, I think the couple things you just said there. First of all, giving referrals is great, but giving a couple of referrals is important. I mean, we have lists that we use if somebody's looking for a lawyer, somebody's looking for an accountant. We don't just give one name, because the other thing too is it depends on what they're looking for. It depends on the personalities. It depends on the specific situation of who you're referring and what you're referring for. But the other thing there is we always develop what we call centers of influence, meaning that I'm referring somebody to somebody who is going to treat them as I would want to be treated. And I think that's very important. The research, the due diligence, checking a couple different references, absolutely. You like to think you can act on the advice of one person or one organization, but then it depends on what you're looking for and the relationship and the dynamics of the personalities. So, sometimes those types of things happens with engagements.
I just thought of another thing as well, and this does happen. We both know this. Everybody knows this. So if a client isn't happy and you fire them or dismiss, whatever you do, and then or it's the other way around, both parties could tend to go to other people and say, that was a really bad client, which they shouldn't do. They shouldn't name the client. But sometimes clients do name the organisation they were working with and say they weren't happy and they didn't do a good job. And sometimes that's not always true. So that's very unfair, isn't it?
Well, it's even more unfair now with so many different ways of rating and giving reviews of businesses and organizations. And I think some of the social media sites and online tools are just like TripAdvisor. If you're going away for somewhere, everybody's reading reviews. Everybody's going online to try and learn about the organization. Yeah. And it's not fair. It's not fair sometimes in terms of the review that's given. So I think you just got to realize you're in business. You're not going to make everybody happy. You can just try and deal with a situation or complaint to the best of your ability. But don't lower your standards and don't lower who you are, because it's a two-way street and there's two sides to that conversation.
As a customer, I have to be really, really, upset to name an organisation who has been really totally terrible with me. Normally, I won't name the organisation, but I will say as a bad experience, always research. Client-wise, in your business in particular, the financial, I would have thought you don't often part ways with clients because, again, you've built the relationship up ahead of time to build that trust.
Yeah, and that's one key thing in our business is we start small and work on that relationship, right? Our key thing for whenever we meet with people is the first time we meet with them, we have a conversation, we have a chat, we find out what they're looking for, we find out what the match is with us. And there's times where we might turn around and say, you know what, you've got everything in hand. There's no reason to be making changes, right? But maybe this is an area we start on. But we've got to have some kind of common ground to be able to build a relationship on and then move forward. And it builds over time because we're trying to build long-term relationships. We're not a transactional kind of business. So it is so important that you work and you take those steps appropriately, right?
Yeah.
And I think in that kind of relationship management too, you're always reevaluating where you are, what you're doing, making sure that they're on board with you so that you're always reflecting on that relationship and asking them how things are progressing.
So it's really good topic, Steve, because I guess for the brand new businesses out there who are just starting to collect clients, the couple of things I would share with them is be loyal to your clients, and your clients normally stay loyal to you. And by that I mean you may have finished working with them now at this point in time, the contract's finished or whatever, they've paid the money, but stay in contact with them. Make sure they get the aftercare. Make sure that you're memorable to them because they could refer you, Steve. And it's the same as the clients. Be loyal to the company you're really happy about and share that brand because it's a two-way street, isn't it? And then hopefully nobody will get fired. Everybody will be happy.
Well, there's been situations where, what we provide and somebody's looking for something, if we don't see that fit, well, then we'll make a referral to somebody who we think might be able to provide what they're looking for, right? So I think giving referrals back and forth is really a key part of doing business, but that loyalty is so important because you burn that loyalty, that can really come back and hurt you from a business perspective because you want to try and make people as happy isn't the word, but as content as possible. And you know what? Make sure you have those conversations. One of the things I always say to people is if you're leaving a client relationship, there's nothing wrong with actually doing what some people will call an exit interview, really where you sit down and you just ask, well, why is it you're leaving us? What is it that we didn't do, or what is the things that maybe you were looking for and didn't get, or things we could change? Because I think you learn from an organizational perspective, and then can accommodate that in how you run your business and structure your business.
So we started the conversation about maybe firing a client. So would the client that we are firing want that conversation with us? Because you can have that conversation. I don't want that conversation.
Well, I think it doesn't hurt to ask, and maybe you already know. And if you don't, I think that's more the case, right? Maybe you don't know.
Why are you firing me,
It doesn't hurt
Steve?
to ask. Well, sure. I mean, if a client says, well, I don't want to do business with you anymore, I mean, I'm not going to ask the question of, well, where did we go wrong, or what didn't go the way?
You fired me. I'm your client. I'm
Yeah.
now saying, why did you fire me, Steve? Would you be totally honest?
In that situation, yeah. You know
The other
what?
way, right?
I think you just have to be honest. You just careful how you word it, but it's got to be communicated.
Burn bridges. I have had people come back to me from years ago who I hoped I would never see again, and obviously I'm so fantastic, they want to work with me again. And I'll be very careful if I give them a second chance. To me, it's not about the money, it's about the working relationship. It really is.
Well, and you don't want to deal with the frustration, right? Because people, what do? They keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Isn't that insanity?
Yeah.
That definition. So something didn't work the first time. Well, you've got to make sure that whatever you're doing and decide to go forward in a new relationship, that you're not just repeating what happened before, because you're going to end up in the same spot.
I totally agree, though. When you started the conversation, you mentioned it is difficult. You've got to, talk to various people in the organisation to see if it's a good idea, if you should fire the client. And I think if you're in a partnership and there's more, if you're not a sole proprietor, obviously you've got to ask other members of the organisation, I guess, if they're happy with what you're doing with this certain client. So I think it's been a good conversation, Steve, and I think, for people listening, watching us today, we've given some tips and ideas on maybe how to work well with clients and how to find out if you are going to be a good fit. But if you've got to say bye-bye, like I am now, bye-bye, Steve, bye-bye. Bye-bye. No, I will see you next week, I promise. I would never say bye-bye.
You just said it 6 times.
So listen, it's been a great conversation. How did you came up with this because it was a real life topic?
A lot of the times where I write about something or I talk about something is because of an example or an experience that I've had with that particular topic. I think it's just a good way of learning about it as well. And I think people should do that, right? If they have a situation happen, try and learn and try and find ways to change if you need to change, evaluate that, but maybe you can make it better, or maybe you can make changes in your organization to try and prevent that from happening again.
Very motivational, Stephen. I think we'll leave it at that now. It's been a lovely conversation. All I've got to say is bye-bye.
Bye.
And we'll see you next week.
All right.
Thanks, Steve. Take care.
Take care.